Greetings, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. So, people have been asking my political opinions, so perhaps I ought to give you my political testament. So, with this statement of my beliefs, then you will know what my prejudices are. I strive not to be prejudiced, but inevitably a person is. I don't want to be overly subjective. Anyway, I've sometimes alluded to this here and there, and perhaps some of my videos can evince a certain political bias. Anyway, I try to strive against that slant and to correct for it, to compensate, to present you with a number of different views. Though, yeah, I'm not neutral. I do agitate, but I think I keep my partisanship within reasonable limits. Strive to be even-handed. Anyway, how would I describe myself? Partly a classical liberal. Now, I know you might say, oh, that's what all right-wingers say. I am a right-winger. I'm a semi-libertarian, depends on the issue. I think consistency is overrated. Just because you might be somewhat libertarian about drugs doesn't mean you have to be somewhat libertarian about gambling, for instance. Anyway, and somewhat, that's an important issue. I don't believe that one has to go all the way this way or that way. All right, I don't believe in logical absolutism. That's to say, to take a certain rationale and follow it to its intellectual vanishing point. Have a certain attitude and follow that to an extreme. You don't need to. You could do, but that's that. It's sort of the absolutist fallacy, the notion that if it's right to be authoritarian, well, you might as well go to the whole hog and be totally authoritarian about absolutely everything. It strikes me as a specious and a feeble argument. Like I'm perturbed by the spread of elf safety culture. I think health matters and so does safety, and also there ought to be some reasonable limits on this and some legislation. What's reasonable? All right, well, that's the tricky thing. I can't precisely define where it is, and nor can I come up with a watertight argument for where it ought to be. But I think there's a balance to be struck. Trouble is, some people, the nanny staters, don't believe that there is a balance to be struck, and they have this maximalist notion of what is warranted by the concern for people's physical well-being, and increasingly they often want for the sort of their mental well-being over there, their emotional well-being, that they must never come to harm, as in they must never encounter a contrary opinion, things like that. A bit like safe spaces at universities, trigger warnings. I remember being at a comedy show in Edinburgh the year before, and said, a comedy act coming up, and by there's a trigger warning for alcoholism. I thought, what? Well, I suppose if somebody's had dipsomania really wreak havoc in their life or cause untold grief for their family, this is going to be a very sorrowful experience, and perhaps they don't want people making light of it. Well, whereas, I think alcohol dependency can be droll. There we are. So generally speaking, I want less compulsion, not more. Fewer restrictions, and that's where I was with liberals, say, in the 19th century, much of the early 20th century. They want to be allowing things, for the most part, and not forbidding them. And now it's the other way around. I remember Robin Page of One Man and His Dog. Probably the real highlight of his career was he got to dine with me in 2002, and he said that liberals become a one-word oxymoron. And I thought, well, that's quite a drone strike. For instance, tobacco advertising. I remember in the Republic of Ireland, United Kingdom, we used to have tobacco advertising into the late 90s. 99, it was banned in the UK. Remember that last time it was there, some big poster for, what's that brand of cigarettes with a purple logo, and some woman in a dress singing out some jingle for it, and that was that. Ken Clarke, the British guy who was health secretary, ironically, and he worked for British American Tobacco. Even in 2001, he flew to Indochina to try and flog fags to the youth over there. So I think it ought to be permitted, and the smoking age should be 16, not 18 as it is now. Oh, but they're going to die. I know they're going to die. They're going to die anyway, not quite as soon. But we ought to be able to, you have all this anti-smoking propaganda, fine. We should have pro-smoking propaganda too. I mean, it is bad for you. Health warnings, some how reasonable, how big, not the whole packet. So no, I don't want to have no business whatsoever. Allow people to make their own choices, including their own mistakes. It's up to you what mistake it is. I remember lamenting the fact that I'd made so many of the wrong choices. Speaking to a school friend, saying, I've taken the wrong turn every single time, not a turn into prison or something. And he said, well, come on, at least we had the choice. And I've heard about people in prison, one thing that really gets their goat is choices are taken away from them. They can't decide what to do, what to wear, when to get up, when the lights go off, what to eat, when to go outside, when not to go outside, and so forth. And that's what really gets them, is being deprived of liberty in that sense, these seemingly petty decisions. And often it's healthy food and they can't have alcohol, they can't, which would be bad for them. And they're not allowed to do lots of stuff which might be fun but bad for them. They resent that. So I would bring back tobacco advertising, no smoking zones. I believe in having lots of no smoking zones, but those are to protect the non-smokers, not the smokers. I wouldn't try and make it impossible or unduly onerous for them to puff away. Like drugs, I'm fairly libertarian on drugs, certainly cannabis, and cannabis is bad for you. People are very foolish to take drugs. They're dirty, they're idiotic, but I'm not going to stand in their way. I'm not going to send them to prison. What should be legalized again? I don't have such a settled view. Should we all go the whole hog and permit heroin to be sold commercially just for recreational use? I'm minded to say yes. I'm not sure about that one. But cannabis, could we just license the weaker strains of cannabis sold fairly affordable? Now, there would still be a market for the very strong strains, which are going to affect a person's mind much more. But I think there would be less because people would go for the cheaper and relatively safer ones. Anyway, maybe I'm deluding myself. But I could do a whole video about the war on drugs. So President Nixon declared a war on drugs, and drugs won, to paraphrase Ronald Reagan. So it's this boomeranged spectacularly, this strident effort to reduce the incidence of drug abuse has in fact increased drug abuse exponentially, and the attendant harms that follow in its train, the crime around it. So likewise on people laying wages, on prostitution, I'm very libertarian on this. Obviously there need to be some sort of restrictions like age limits, for example, or maybe even how much somebody can gamble. So I suppose I'm a small C conservative. I have been a member of the Conservative Party in the past in the United Kingdom. I'm thinking of rejoining the Conservative Unionist Party. Be a bit of a Judas kiss for me to endorse a political party in the Republic of Ireland. I do have one in mind. Now, no party is perfect, and the trouble about the Irish Republic is every party is Europhile. Apparently there is some Republican party, as in sort of anti-English party there, that is actually against the EU, but is also Catholic conservative, saying we're against homosexuality, we're against abortion, and I'm not sure what else. They're back to old-style Catholic ultranationalism. And is it Jerry McGeough, this former IRA man who spent some years in prison? He is a luminary of it. But so even if people against the EU, they just want a Celtic union of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, and I'm not sure where else, maybe the Basque Country. So I tend to favour lower taxation, better with lower unemployment. Here I am wearing this Margaret Thatcher t-shirt. I know it's meant to look like Che Guevara. It's an irony, it's a joke. It's also my two fingers to all these Che Guevara groupies. Oh, he's so trendy. And there you are. Isn't it a bittersweet irony that he's now a capitalist emblem, and some enterprising people have made fortunes of selling his likeness to the gullible and the uninformed? Now, I suppose there's some people very well clued up would wear his image. And I know some of the people he was battling against were bad, but he did many bad things, not just in as much as if you're going to have a revolution, you have to kill people. You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, and you cannot make a revolution without breaking heads. I know that hoary adage, but even when he ran Cuba, he ran it as a dictatorship, and not an entirely benign one. You know, to give him his due, there were some things you could say in his favour, as in sort of spreading literacy and healthcare and so forth, but crushing the free trades unions and no freedom of expression and turn the country into a giant prison, not allowed out. Because, you know, most capitalist countries, if you don't like it, well, I think all capitalist countries, certainly now, if you don't like it, you can leave. Nobody's trying to keep you in. Will the other country let you in? That's the question. Anyway, so, in some ways I'd like to go back to Thatcher, not the unemployment, not mass unemployment, because I've seen how corrosive that is. I've been unemployed myself. People could be producing wealth, but they're consuming it, just doing nothing, achieving nothing. What a staggering and scandalous waste of human potential. and that leads to more drug abuse, and it leads to more crime. The devil makes work for idle hands. You say drug abuse, I thought you were in favour of drugs. Well, I would allow people to take them. I think they would be very unwise to take them, so try and persuade them not to. There we are. What else? So, so policies are trying to keep employment down. She said that tackling inflation is a higher priority than keeping unemployment low. Difficult to accept that argument if we were one of those thrown on the scrap heap, jobless for years. Those sort of black spots of unemployment, very high areas of unemployment where the coal mine and so on closed, and they say it tore the guts out of a community. These miners in some areas of the United Kingdom, they were horny-handed sons of toil. They were proud, they were macho, and suddenly that was ripped away from them, and they just couldn't adjust. They didn't have the soft skills to be a waiter or work in a call center or something like that. And some women in these communities were better able to adapt to the new dispensation. So public services, we need emergency services. Think back to what they used to say in the British Isles in the 18th century, the night watchman state, as in having the fire brigade as then was, not as a commercial company, because it used to be a profit-driven company until that time that if you had a fire, the fire brigade would turn up and negotiate their price, how much you're willing to be paid for you and your family to be saved and your property. But they said, no, we can't do that because people just agree to anything they couldn't possibly pay. And these odious prices that charge is utterly immoral, exploiting people in the frankest possible fashion. But anyway, we need that. And obviously there was the watchman, literally the night watchman state with his handbell to raise the alarm if he sees a fire or a burglar or something. And then parish constables. Obviously we've got police in the 1820s. And what else do we have? Well, we have to have courts and judges and a legislature. We have to have an army and a navy. So therefore, emergencies to step in. Even a libertarian would agree to some of this. But also I include healthcare, lifeboats, mountain rescue, things like that. So, decent public services and schooling and so forth. Universities, I would have far fewer university places, far less funding. 40% of young people going on to tertiary education is ludicrously high, especially if it's university education. There could be other post-18 education, which is not that. Germany's got a much better system with only 20% of young people going on to third level education. So the NHS, I know it's got its shortcomings, but overall it's superb. My experience of it has been, on the whole, has been brilliant. Very, very satisfied with it. And there's some really dedicated professionals who do a marvellous job. So just can't be grateful enough for this. And think, well, if I was in somewhere like the United States, we'd be paying through the nose for this, for insurance, and they'd be always arguing, trying to find reasons not to pay, and blah, 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 and they wouldn't pay for the first $1,000 of things, and they don't want to accept you if you've ever been ill, pre-existing conditions, not even if you have one, but if you might have had one, if some of the symptoms cross over, that's horrific. What a nightmare. Isn't it brilliant, this peace of mind, that I could have any condition, no matter how pricey, and the NHS would treat me without asking for a penny. It's all covered through taxation. So I just think it's more efficient as well, cost effective in all sorts of ways. It's better, don't have to worry about the price, and because they bulk buy services, that means they get them cheaper. Not driven by the profit motive, which obviously collides with their healthcare imperatives, and I know which one's going to win every single time. The profit imperative is going to win out over the healthcare imperative. I've seen it in education time and time again. Independent schools or indeed universities, because they're somewhat profit-driven in the United Kingdom, if its education imperatives collide with profit imperatives, the business imperative, the drive for profit, that will win, hands down, without a doubt, on every single occasion. And they will sacrifice standards, they will de-skill, they will grade inflate to make more money. It's a given. Subsidiarity, not that much into that. I'm not really into localism because I'm quite into the United Kingdom, better still the British Isles as a unit. Didn't want devolution. Most people want devolution in Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, even London. So all right, have it. But I think excessive localism is a bad thing. Our county council's going to do it differently. I'm not against having county councils being able to make some bylaws, make some secondary legislation. But I don't think we should be too fussed about that. And this whole European Union issue, I sometimes ask myself, am I on the wrong side? I'm a cosmopolitan chap, I'm a polyglot, I've been to every single member state of the European Union. Should I favour the EU and just make that mental leap crossover and say, okay, I'm a European first and foremost, that's my identity. I find Europe enthralling. I find some of the cultures deeply attractive, and therefore I to favor unity. And that wouldn't diminish my Irish identity, my British identity. You know, maybe I should. And then say, well, Brussels and Strasbourg, that should be the centre of power. I feel a bit conflicted about that. But overall, I'm a Eurosceptic for reasons I've stated in other videos. I shan't waste my breath repeating them here. So generally want lower regulation. Laissez faire, laissez passer. Even if it leads to worse outcomes sometimes. Like I've said this about drugs, gambling, alcohol, tobacco, speed limits, things like that. Not to have no safety legislation whatsoever. That's a cooking fat. That's a spoonerism, making that noise through there. So, you know, letting people have to work longer hours. 8-hour day, quite nice. If they want to work a 10-hour day, okay. There should be some sort of limit. I'd have most children leaving at school at 14, going into full-time work, but they could work limited hours, maybe 20 hours a week or something. I believe in having a minimum wage. It shouldn't be too high. It's going to reach £10 in the United Kingdom. Seems about right to me. One thing about immigration, I remember 20 years ago in the UK, a lot of sort of say like hotels were saying, oh, we can't get the staff. Pay them more. If you offered higher salaries, you would get the staff. We've got to have immigration to keep the wages down. So I'm not against all immigration, as I've said elsewhere. Reasonable level of immigration. Read my lengthy articles in the Duran about this. So let me see, the death penalty, I'm opposed. You know, not absolutely, not in principle. I think I can make an exception for the Saddam Husseins of this world. I find it quite distasteful. I'm a little bit squeamish. I'm not a pacifist. I believe fighting is acceptable. I'm not against nuclear weapons per se. Obviously, it makes me blanche to just think what they could do. It just, well, I prefer not to. It doesn't bear contemplation. So I recognise that fighting is sometimes morally justified. Trying to reduce civilian casualties. Trouble is, if you strive too hard, then you're going to lose. Especially the other side has no such ethical restraints. So what else? Yeah, torture is deeply distasteful and is definitely illegal. Should it ever be used? Seems to be a no-brainer that if it's going to prevent huge numbers of people being killed, it should be used. And it is revolting. Okay, so, you know, wars cannot be won by Salvation Army methods. I think a lot of people in Western countries, they kid themselves about what needs to be done and what has been done by their countries. The Second World War was always held up as this crusade, as this morally unanswerable case for the Allies, obviously conveniently turning Nelson's eye to some of the war crimes committed by the Allies, focusing solely on war crimes that were most definitely committed by the Axis. And what's the other thing? Is disregarding the fact that the Allies used torture too, not on quite such a level, including the British, including in London, in the cage, in that place at Ham Common, and what else? That huge numbers of enemy civilians were going to be killed. And you can do that, or you can lose. You can do that, or you can lose. Sometimes that's a choice. Sometimes you wouldn't lose, but the war would go on longer, and the death toll would be higher on both sides. So that's that. So I think a lot of people don't have the stomach to face up to these stark choices, and it's very distasteful. So let's say the environment. I do care about the environment, and you know, I want carbon footprint to be reduced. Climate changing is happening. The jury's been returned on that one. The science has been absolutely clear for over 3 decades, and on. It's going to require real sacrifices. We're going to have to live less well. Which politician will be able to persuade us to do this, to vote through the necessary legislation? You can't have a car, or not as big a car, or drive as far, and we're going to have to tax you more. I think the thing is, deep in the countryside, you need a car because there is no public transport sometimes. So one way you can get around, say, all right, in cities we'll charge you for the parking, charge you through the nose to discourage people from driving. But the very wealthy will still drive because £100 to park for a day is worth it for them. Okay, they will. We're not proposing to outlaw cars, go to electric-only vehicles. We've got to make public transport a viable alternative, more transport to more different places, but more platforms, more capacity, and not huge delays, affordable, and the UK is terrible at that, the most expensive trains in the world, and things like that. So we're going to have to tax people more to fly. I fly quite a bit, not as much as I used to, and yes, I'm bad, okay, I'm a hypocrite, and only making it too pricey for me is going to make me significantly reduce what I do. So this is where the authoritarian side has to come in, and I'm sad. I just don't see a way around it, but if it's between saving the planet and having a bit more authoritarianism, I'm afraid we're going to have to be a bit authoritarian. And it obviously behoves us in these relatively privileged countries to make the sacrifices that we can afford to bear. Smaller houses, but there'll be more body heat. It doesn't get too hot in Ireland or Great Britain. So less electricity used, more thermal insulation, double glazing, everything else. Wear more clothes at home. And no more sort of showing off, being macho. My car is bigger than your car, like a sort of penis-sized competition. It's ludicrous. It's pathetic. People trying to show off for their Chelsea tractors. One of the good things about London is the way it's so difficult to find a parking space, and already they're very pricey. You pay through the nose for them. We've got to have more electric charging stations for electric vehicles. And it's great that the UK is going all electric. Be like Singapore. Cars can only be 10 years old, either scrap or export at that point. What else? Yeah, the externalities of the motor vehicle industry or the oil industry shouldn't be offloaded in the public sector. The polluting industry have to pick up the bill. I know they might pass some of that on to consumers. I mean, as about climate change, I'm not saying the world is going to die in 100 years, the planet's going to blow up or something. I'm not saying the human race is going to be wiped out, but it's going to have a very serious effect on us, as in, obviously, more storms, summer's too hot, more extreme weather events, but overall too hot. Melting of glaciers and polar ice caps is already been happening for some time. I know climate changes anyway. We've had ice ages, we've had hotter eras, but it's never changed so fast and so much. So the green belt, well, I do want to protect the green belt, and I suppose that is intervening in the free market. I don't believe in an absolute free market about that, because wouldn't it be a pity if we had no parks? So a bit of legislation to protect the natural world and indeed endangered species. But I don't believe in animal rights. I don't want any animals to go extinct. But fox hunting is fine by me, hare coursing, bullfighting. And sometimes I see things that happen to animals, and that does upset me, especially noble animals. Canines are human. I would prefer to save a good hound than an evil human. So I can absolutely adore dogs because they express several emotions. There's a reason why they say loyal as a dog. Canine fidelity is really something for us all to study. We would profit well to emulate it. A dog would die for you. Your dog would attack a man 10 times his size to save you. How about that? Gotta hand it to them. All dogs go to heaven. So I'm a secular person. I find religion entertaining, a bit like going to the theatre, and I sometimes like to read religious texts and imbue them with a special reverence and vocal flourishes, but I'm not a believer. So I think a quick way to find out somebody's attitude is to ask which country they think is the best governed country in the world, or my model would be Switzerland. Now, possibly Denmark, but there's quite a lot of state intervention there. Switzerland with its smoking rooms, with its legalized prostitution, with its problem-solving, harm-reducing approach to drugs. Oh, I don't like the compulsory military service. Nowhere's perfect. They've managed to be neutral. They haven't gone to war against any other country for over 200 years, since France invaded them. They've got so many natural disadvantages. The Alps, not very fertile. No natural resources to speak of. No coastline. Quite small, surrounded by several much larger countries, and yet they're affluent. How have they prospered? Peace. Peace is the best economic policy. And there are other examples of this like Sweden. And that's it, because you beggar yourself fighting. I thought, wow, that is the way. Do I want to suffer? No. Do I want my friends to get killed? No. And I know there are lots of villains in the world. Be nice to take them all on and get away with it, but the trouble is one war causes 7 more, seems to me. And I'm not completely against fighting on principle, but I believe in a more circumspect foreign policy, having supported foreign intervention previously and still think it was the right thing to do. But in future, I would still say exercise caution, discretion is a better part of valor. Denmark, as I say, is also very well run, uses loads of green energy, the highest standard of living in the world, the happiest country. If you look at, longevity, suicide rate, crime rate, the environment, number of days off, hours worked, disposable income. So yeah, in terms of income, they're doing very, very well indeed. But obviously it's not just all about money. And they don't have tons of billionaires. The US, we're so rich. Yeah, you have an awful lot of billionaires. That doesn't mean the average American is particularly well off financially or in any other way. The Netherlands, I think they're very sensible, very pragmatic people. yeah, that's a country I also admire as well. Canada, I think, is marvelous. I think all America's problems could be solved by this two-word policy: copy Canada. All right, so that, in briefest summary, is my political stance. I'm no political philosopher. I have little patience for theorizing about such things, or any grand pretensions to an intellectual basis for my beliefs. These are my rather syncretic and Catholic beliefs. I mean, Catholic with the small c sense. So my interests are eclectic in politics and so many other things. So please follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. And please donate to me on Patreon. Better still on PayPal. It's a lot easier. You donate to Patreon, I have to put it into PayPal anyway, to put it into my bank. George from Ireland. PayPal, find me, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. And direct message me. You want to book lessons. I teach people online in English literature, English as a foreign language, history, politics and government, religious studies, French, and things of that nature. If you're in London, I'll teach you in person. And I'm a tour guide in London, so please book a guided tour with me. Thank you so much. I'm very warmly appreciative of my fans who've been donating lately. That's vital. It's a lifeline without which this channel couldn't be sustained. As you can imagine, it takes a bit of preparation to read up on these things so much. So thank you for subscribing. Please tell all your friends and neighbours. Good night.